You again.
Oh gosh. Hey, how's it going?
Megan, good to see you, huh?
So good to see you too. Cool. So I guess we should just get started. We have all these questions in here that'll come out at random. So I'll pull out the first one. What would you say was one of the most unusual climbs you've ever been on?
In Northern California, about 7 or 8 years ago, I climbed an old growth redwood tree. And it was, I
Oh,
mean, that was
yeah.
super unusual for sure. And it was cool because for me, like my roots in climbing, I grew up in Northern California. And before I was a rock climber, I climbed trees as a kid, right? And so I'd always had that connection to the redwood forest. And spending so much time over here in Spain, climbing on these amazing tufa features. When I would go back to California, I would look at these trees and I would see the shapes in the bark, and I was like, oh man, that's kind of like those are kind of like tufas in Spain, and then
Mhm.
I devised this whole plan. We went out with these scientists and climbed the trees and did this whole research project. Well, you get inspired in one place and then you go back home and then you see things in a new way. So, Megan, what a great opportunity to host HBO's The Climb show together. What moment from the show was most memorable for you?
The first episode of Majorca was pretty memorable all around. There was a lot going on, and so many of the climbers had not really deep water soloed before, and a lot of them expressed a lot of fear towards that discipline of climbing. Because when we first got there, in my mind, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know if people are going to actually climb. Like, I feel like they're that scared that they might not climb. And so being able to have those conversations with them and kind of walk them through their confidence around climbing and how they could deep water solo and they were going to be amazing. And then to watch that actually happen, I thought was pretty cool. Can you explain deep water soloing and share what's going through your mind climbing over water that's different from other forms of rock climbing?
So, deep water soloing, climbing without a rope over the water, sometimes up to like 70, maybe sometimes a little bit higher, 80 feet. It's also this element of adventure because every time you fall, you get totally drenched and you have to change out your chalk bags. And it's a question I get a lot. People ask me, like, what do you do with your chalk bags? And thankfully, I have a sponsor. Prana gives me lots of chalk bags, so it's not hard for me, but I do go through a lot of them and a lot of chalk. Um, but it's just a whole process. It's a whole ordeal to get dry, change your shoes, change your chalk bag, and then you have to start at the bottom again, and then you have to climb back up to where you fell. So you really want to maximize each attempt, and there is also this element of you know maybe the risk or the element of danger that you don't want to fall as well, and so you really sometimes dig deep to fight to stay on the wall and hang on for as long as you possibly can. Question: what climbing destinations are still on your list and why?
I haven't gone bouldering in the Rocklands, and I feel like as someone who primarily loves to boulder, I definitely need to go there. So that I would say that that is highest on my list of places to go.
Rocklands looks incredible. I mean,
Have you not been either?
I've never been either. Yeah, yeah, we
Oh
should
my
go.
gosh. We should,
We should,
yeah,
we should do a
seriously.
prom trip there.
Yeah, that would be amazing. I've been dying to go there.
Everybody from prom
Oh,
is listening. We should do a
yeah, right.
trip to.
Okay, from long routes to difficult sequences to first ascents, what are the ingredients for the perfect project for you?
I love kind of trying to mix, high end athleticism with with nature's beauty. That kind of connection is like this kind of art form, right? Of climbing. There's a lot of beautiful places to climb around the world, and there's a lot of potential for epic projects all over the place. Within climbing, there's all these different ways to explore our potential and push our
Hmm.
limits. So, Megan, No stranger to climbing comps, you've played the role as competitor, host, and commentator. What is a surprisingly fun element of being a host that you don't get from competing?
As a climber, there is a little bit of FOMO that's going on, right? Because you're watching people climb. So
No doubt.
you're not in it, right? You don't have to be in the competitive aspect, which is some sort of a relief, but then you're also low key jealous that like you don't get to climb. Is it true that you and Jason Momoa met as teenagers in Waco tanks? And if so, what do you remember about first climbing together?
I met Jason back in the day in Waco Tanks when, some of my first climbing trips outside of California. Very important moments in my evolution as a climber, and it's cool that Jason and I have that connection from way back then. I think one of the interesting things that most people don't know is that he was a climber before he was
Hmm.
acting or anything. Kind of interesting that our lives have had this parallel paths in some ways, and then of course kind of reconnecting and then having this opportunity to do this show together has been an amazing experience. How does your mental state during competitions differ from when you're working on a personal climbing project? And how does the preparation differ?
I guess maybe it's more the later part of projecting. At the beginning of projecting, I feel like you're kind of trying to figure everything out, so there's not as much pressure that you put on yourself, and you don't have to have that mental game as strong. But when it comes time to like trying to send, that's where I think the mental fortitude that you get from competition climbing really lends itself to projecting effectively because you're kind of in that same moment when you're about to send something, it's kind of like go time, just as if it wasn't a competition. So I always felt that having that competitive background in climbing and being so used to trying to turn it on in a moment was always so helpful when it comes to projecting, just
Yeah.
because that's the easiest way to end up sending. But I do think it's nice having that time before you get to that level of projecting where it is kind of like free and breezy and you're not really like you're just in the moment figuring it out. It's got a lightness to it that's
Yeah.
really enjoyable because you don't really feel that lightness in competitive climbing ever. You're always kind of like gripped and like ready to go.
Right on. Well,
Sweet.
we're all out of questions here. Can't believe we're kind of like at the home stretch to finally release the show. It's going to be pretty cool to share it with the world.
Yeah, I can't wait for everyone to see it. I think it's going to be amazing. It's going to be like nothing anyone's ever seen before, too. So I think that's the coolest part. But looking forward to see you in the new year
For
and
sure.
watching everything on the big screen.